She sat behind the reception desk answering phones and filing paperwork, invisible to most people who walked through Lincoln Elementary's front doors. At 52, Maria Santos had been the school secretary for 8 years, known for her quiet efficiency and warm smile when greeting parents and visitors. The teachers saw her as helpful support staff, the principal appreciated her organizational skills, and the children waved politely when they passed her desk. But when 3 armed men burst through the school's main entrance at 10:47 a.m. on what should have been an ordinary Tuesday morning, demanding access to the children and making threats that turned every parent's worst nightmare into reality, what Maria did next would transform her from an overlooked administrative worker into a legend that would be whispered about in law enforcement circles for decades to come. Welcome to those who left a trace. Before we dive into this extraordinary story of hidden strength and protective instinct, tell me in the comments from which city in the world are you watching this video today? And if you believe that heroes often hide in plain sight, hit that subscribe button to support stories that honor those who rise to meet impossible challenges. Lincoln Elementary School sat nestled in the quiet suburban neighborhood of Maplewood, a place where the most serious daily concerns typically involved lunch menu disputes and playground equipment maintenance. The brick building housed 340 students from kindergarten through 5th grade, along with faculty and staff of 32 dedicated educators who had chosen to work in what they considered one of the safest environments imaginable. Maria Santos had accepted the position of school secretary 8 years earlier, following a career change that had taken her away from work she rarely discussed with her colleagues. The job provided steady hours, good benefits, and the satisfaction of supporting an educational environment where children could learn and grow in safety. At 52, Maria possessed a kind of unassuming presence that made her nearly invisible in the daily flow of school activities. She handled scheduling, managed communications between parents and teachers, and maintained the countless administrative details that kept the school functioning smoothly. Her desk was positioned in the main office, directly adjacent to the school's primary entrance, making her the first person visitors encountered when entering the building. Principal Janet Morrison had come to rely heavily on Maria's competence and discretion. "I don't know how we managed before Maria arrived," she often told other administrators. "She handles everything with such calm efficiency that I sometimes forget how much she actually does." The teachers appreciated Maria's helpful attitude and her ability to solve problems without creating drama or bureaucratic complications. Parents found her courteous and knowledgeable when they called with questions about school policies or their children's activities. But none of them knew anything about Maria's previous career, the specialized training she had received, or the skills she had developed during 20 years of work that officially had never existed. That Tuesday morning began like countless others, with Maria arriving at 7:15 a.m. to prepare for the day's activities. She unlocked the main office, started the coffee machine, and began reviewing her schedule of appointments and tasks. The principal wouldn't arrive until 7:45, and the teachers typically began filtering in around the same time. Maria used the quiet early morning time to organize her work and mentally prepare for the day ahead. She appreciated these peaceful moments before the building filled with the energy and noise of children and educators beginning another day of learning. At 7:50 a.m., Principal Morrison arrived with her usual cheerful greeting. "Good morning, Maria. How are we looking for today?" Maria consulted her appointment calendar. "Good morning, Janet. You have a district meeting at 2 o'clock, parent conference is scheduled for this afternoon, and the fire drill is planned for 10:30. Morrison nodded, gathering her materials for the morning faculty meeting. "Perfect. I'll be in conference room B with the teachers until about 8:30. After that, I'll be in my office preparing for the district meeting." As the morning progressed, Lincoln Elementary settled into its familiar rhythm. Children arrived via bus and car, filling the hallways with their conversations and laughter. Teachers moved through their lesson plans, and Maria managed a steady flow of phone calls, visitor check-ins, and administrative requests that characterized her daily routine. At 10:15 a.m., Maria was processing attendance reports when she noticed a van pulling into the school's parking lot. The vehicle moved slowly, as if the driver was unfamiliar with the layout, and parked in a space near the main entrance rather than in the designated visitor area. 3 men emerged from a van, and Maria immediately sensed that something was wrong. Their movements were too deliberate, their scanning of the building too systematic, and their approach to the main entrance carried an urgency that didn't match the casual pace of typical school visitors. Maria's training from her previous career kicked in automatically. She noted details that most people wouldn't have observed. The way the men positioned themselves to cover different angles of approach, the bulges in their clothing that suggested concealed weapons, and the communication patterns that indicated coordinated planning. As the men approached the main entrance, Maria activated the school security protocol with movements so subtle that anyone observing would have thought she was simply adjusting papers on her desk. She triggered silent alarms that would alert law enforcement and secured electronic locks on interior classroom doors. The men entered the main office at 10:47 a.m., their demeanor immediately confirming Maria's worst suspicions. The leader, a tall man in his 30s with cold eyes and nervous energy, approached her desk while the other two positioned themselves to control the office entrance. "Where are the children?" the leader demanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. Maria looked up from her paperwork with an expression of confused concern that concealed the tactical assessment she was conducting. "I'm sorry, sir, but I'll need you to sign in and state the purpose of your visit. Are you here to see a specific student?" The man's expression hardened, and he reached into his jacket to reveal the grip of a handgun. "Lady, I'm not here for a social visit. We need access to the children, and we need it now." Maria's mind raced through the situation's implications and her available options. The school's lockdown procedures have been activated, but it would take several minutes for law enforcement to arrive. Meanwhile, 3 armed men were demanding access to 340 children who were currently in their classrooms, unaware of the danger that had just entered their school. "Sir," Maria said calmly, "I'm going to need you to explain what this is about. The children are in their classes, and we have policies about..." The leader cut her off by fully drawing his weapon and pointing it directly at her. "Stop talking and start moving. Take us to the classrooms now, or people are going to get hurt." Maria stood slowly, her movements appearing compliant, but actually positioning herself for actions that none of the 3 men could have anticipated. "Of course," she said quietly. "I just want to make sure no one gets hurt. The children are just down this hallway." As Maria moved toward the office door, she was calculating distances, timing, and tactical opportunities with the precision of someone whose survival had once depended on such assessments. The 3 men had made a critical error in their planning. They had assumed that a middle-aged school secretary would be helpless in the face of armed intimidation, and they had positioned themselves in a confined space where the numerical advantage was negated by limited maneuverability. Maria reached the office doorway and turned slightly, as if checking to make sure the men were following her. In that moment, she acted with the speed and precision that had once made her one of the most effective operators in a classified government program. Her first move disabled the nearest gunman before he could react. Maria's attack was so sudden and precise that the first gunman was unconscious before he hit the floor. Her elbow strike to his temple was delivered with the kind of accuracy that comes from years of training in close-quarters combat, and the weapon fell from his hand as he collapsed. The leader spun toward Maria, tried to bring his gun to bear, but she was already moving. Her 20 years in classified operations had taught her that in confined spaces, speed and aggression could overcome numerical disadvantages if applied with perfect timing. Maria's second strike caught the leader in the solar plexus, doubling him over and causing him to lose his grip on his weapon. Before he could recover, she followed with a knee strike that rendered him unconscious and sent him crashing into the office wall. The third gunman had barely begun to react when Maria turned toward him, her movements fluid and controlled despite the violence of the previous seconds. He was fumbling for his weapon when Maria closed the distance between them and applied a chokehold that cut off blood flow to his brain. In less than 20 seconds, all three armed intruders were unconscious on the floor of Lincoln Elementary's main office. Maria quickly secured their weapons, checking each man to ensure they were completely incapacitated. Her actions were methodical and professional, reflecting training that none of her colleagues could have imagined she possessed. As she worked, Maria could hear the sound of approaching sirens, indicating that law enforcement was responding to the silent alarm she had triggered. She also heard Principal Morrison's voice over the school's intercom system, implementing lockdown procedures and instructing teachers to keep students in their classrooms until further notice. Maria activated her desk phone and connected to the district's emergency line. "This is Maria Santos at Lincoln Elementary. The armed intruders have been neutralized. 3 suspects are unconscious and disarmed in the main office. I repeat, the threat has been eliminated." The response from the district emergency coordinator was immediate but confused. "Maria, did you say the threat has been eliminated? We show that police units are still responding to your location." Maria looked down at the 3 unconscious men, then at the weapon she had secured. "That's correct. The suspects are no longer a threat. However, I recommend that law enforcement personnel still respond to process the scene and take the suspects into custody." Principal Morrison appeared in the office doorway, her expression shifting from concern to complete bewilderment as she took in the scene. "Maria, what? Are you all right?" Maria was already returning to her desk, straightening papers that had been displaced during the brief confrontation. "I'm fine, Janet. These men entered the school with weapons and demanded access to children. I prevented them from reaching the students." Morrison stared at the 3 unconscious intruders, then at Maria, who was calmly resuming her administrative duties, as if nothing extraordinary had occurred. "Maria, how did you do this? I mean, they had guns." Before Maria could respond, the first police officers burst through the school's main entrance, weapons drawn and ready for armed confrontation. They stopped abruptly when they saw the scene in the office. 3 unconscious suspects, secured weapons, and a middle-aged secretary sitting at her desk. Sergeant Mike Torres, the lead responding officer, approached cautiously. "Ma'am, are you Maria Santos, the person who called in the all-clear?" Maria stood and extended identification. "Yes, Sergeant. I'm the school secretary." These 3 men entered the school at approximately 10:47 a.m. with weapons, demanding access to the children. They've been disarmed and are unconscious, but breathing normally. Torres looked from Maria to the suspects to the secured weapons, clearly struggling to process what he was seeing. "Ma'am, how exactly did you manage to subdue 3 armed men?" Maria's response was matter-of-fact. "Sergeant, I have some training in personal defense. When they threatened the children, I used that training." As paramedics arrived to assess the unconscious suspects and additional officers secured the scene, word of what had occurred began spreading through the school and into the community. Teachers who had been locked in their classrooms with their students were gradually learning that their school secretary had single-handedly prevented what could have been an unthinkable tragedy. Detective Lisa Chong arrived 20 minutes later to begin the investigation. As the lead detective on cases involving school security, she had responded to numerous threats and incidents, but never one that had been resolved before law enforcement arrived. "Ms. Santos," Detective Chong said, "I need to ask you some questions about what happened here. This kind of outcome is unusual." Maria nodded, understanding that her actions would require explanation. "Detective, I'm happy to cooperate with your investigation." Chong consulted her notes. "Can you walk me through exactly what occurred from the time these men entered the school?" Maria provided a detailed account of the incident, describing the suspect's behavior, their demands, and her response. However, she was careful not to reveal details about her training or background that would raise questions she wasn't prepared to answer. "Ms. Santos, Chong said after reviewing Maria's statement, "You mentioned that you have training in personal defense. Can you be more specific about that training?" Maria had anticipated this question. "Detective, I took some self-defense courses over years. When they threatened to harm the children, I felt I had no choice but to act." Chong studied Maria's demeanor, noting the calm competence that seemed inconsistent with someone who had just been involved in a violent confrontation. "Ma'am, disarming and subduing 3 armed suspects requires more than basic self-defense training. Are you sure there isn't more you can tell me about your background?" Before Maria could respond, Principal Morrison interrupted the conversation. "Detective Chong, does it really matter how Maria stopped these men? What matters is that she saved our children." Chong nodded, understanding Morrison's perspective, but still curious about the skills Maria had demonstrated. "You're right, Principal Morrison. The important thing is that everyone is safe." As the investigation continued, and the suspects were transported to hospital for medical evaluation before being booked, Maria found herself the center of attention in ways that made her uncomfortable. Teachers approached her with expressions of amazement and gratitude. Parents called to thank her, and local media began requesting interviews. But Maria deflected the attention with the same quiet efficiency she brought to all her duties. "I just did what anyone would do to protect the children," she told everyone who asked about her actions. However, Detective Chong continued her investigation into Maria's background, and what she discovered would add another layer to the mystery of how a school secretary had managed to neutralize 3 armed intruders with such professional competence. 3 days later, Chong approached Maria at her desk with a folder containing information that would change how everyone at Lincoln Elementary understood their mild-mannered secretary. "Ms. Santos," Chong said quietly, "I think we need to have another conversation." Detective Chong placed a folder on Maria's desk and sat down in a chair typically used by visiting parents. Her expression was serious but respectful, indicating that whatever she had discovered had fundamentally changed her understanding of the incident. "Ms. Santos," Chong began carefully, "my investigation into Tuesday's incident required some background verification. I hope you understand that when someone demonstrates the kind of tactical skills you showed, we need to understand how that's possible." Maria continued organizing files on her desk, her outward calm concealing the tension she felt about where this conversation was headed. "Detective Chong, I understand that my actions might seem unusual, but I was simply protecting the children." Chong opened the folder and consulted documents that were partially redacted, indicating classified or sensitive information. "Maria, I've been in law enforcement for 15 years, and I've worked with military personnel, federal agents, and specialized tactical units. What you did on Tuesday wasn't self-defense training. That was professional-level combat skills applied with precision that takes years to develop." Maria looked up from her work, meeting Chang's gaze directly. "Detective, I'm not sure what you're looking for, but I can assure you that my only concern was preventing those men from reaching the students." Chong leaned forward slightly. "Maria, I've been authorized to ask you directly. Did you serve in the military or work for any government agencies in capacity that would explain your capabilities?" The question hung in the air between them, and Maria realized that her careful attempts to maintain her cover identity were being challenged by a detective who had the resources and authority to investigate backgrounds that most people couldn't access. "Detective Chong," Maria said finally, "there are some things about my previous work that I'm not at liberty to discuss, but I can tell you that everything I did on Tuesday was motivated by my desire to protect the children in this school." Chong nodded, indicating that she had expected this response. "Maria, I'm not trying to compromise any classified information, but I need to understand whether there are security implications related to your presence here that the school district should know about." Maria considered her response carefully. After 20 years of maintaining operational security, she was reluctant to reveal details about her background, but she also understood that Chang's investigation could uncover information that would be more damaging if revealed without her cooperation. "Detective, my previous work was with a government agency that conducted operations I can't discuss. That work ended 8 years ago when I accepted the position here. Since then, I've been exactly what I appear to be, a school secretary who cares about these children and this community." Chong made notes in her file. Maria, was your previous work the kind that would make you or the school a target for the kind of attack we saw on Tuesday? The question addressed Maria's own concerns about the incident. She had wondered whether the attack was random or whether someone from her past had discovered her location and targeted the school to reach her. Detective, I don't believe Tuesday's incident was related to my previous work. These men appear to be planning an attack on the school for reasons unrelated to my presence here. Chong closed her folder. Maria, I'm going to file my report indicating that you used appropriate defensive measures to protect the school and its students. However, I strongly recommend that you consider whether your background creates any ongoing security risks that should be addressed. After Chong left, Maria sat alone in the main office, reflecting on the implications of the conversation. She had spent 8 years building a quiet life where her past remained buried, but Tuesday's incident had exposed skills that raised questions she had hoped never to answer. Principal Morrison appeared in the doorway, her expression indicating that she had observed the conversation with Detective Chong. Maria, is there something I should know about what happened on Tuesday? Maria looked at Morrison, weighing her options. She had come to genuinely care about Lincoln Elementary and the people who worked there, and she realized that maintaining her secret might put them at risk if her past ever caught up with her. Janet, Maria said carefully, my previous career involved work that I can't discuss in detail. But I want you to know that my commitment to this school and these children is completely genuine. Morrison sat down in the chair Chong had vacated. Maria, I don't care what you did before you came here. What I care about is that you saved our children's lives. But I need to know if your being here puts the school at risk. Maria appreciated Morrison's directness. Janet, I don't believe my presence here creates any ongoing danger. But I understand if you feel that my background raises concerns about my continued employment. Morrison was quiet for several minutes, clearly considering the implications of what she had learned. When she spoke again, her voice carried the authority of someone who had made a difficult decision. Maria, you've been an exemplary employee for 8 years. More than that, you've become part of our school family. On Tuesday, you risked your life to protect our children. As far as I'm concerned, that's the only qualification that matters. Maria felt a wave of relief and gratitude. Janet, thank you. I promise you that my commitment to this school will never waver. Morrison stood to leave, then paused at the doorway. Maria, there's one thing I need to ask. Are there other skills from your previous work that might be helpful in keeping our school safe? Maria smiled for the first time since the incident. Janet, I hope we never find out. But if we do, I'll be ready. In the weeks that followed, life at Lincoln Elementary gradually returned to normal, but with subtle changes that reflected the new reality of Maria's revealed capabilities. Teachers and staff treated her with the same respect they always had, but now that respect was informed by knowledge of what she had done to protect them. Parents expressed their gratitude in countless ways, from simple thank you notes to offers of dinners and gifts that Maria politely declined. The children, largely unaware of the danger they had been in, continued to wave politely when they passed her desk. But Maria noticed that she was no longer invisible in the way she had been before. People paid attention when she spoke, deferred to her judgment on security matters, and treated her suggestions with the weight typically reserved for expert opinions. Detective Chong remained in occasional contact, providing updates on the prosecution of the 3 suspects and consulting with Maria on security assessments for other schools in the district. The suspects, when they regained consciousness, have been unable to provide coherent explanations for how they have been overpowered by a single unarmed woman. 6 months later, Maria received a visit that reminded her that her past would never be completely buried. A man in a conservative suit appeared at her desk during the lunch hour, presenting credentials that she recognized immediately. Ms. Santos, he said quietly, I represent certain government interests that remain concerned about your welfare and security. Maria looked at the credentials, noting the agency designation that brought back memories of her previous life. I retired from that life 8 years ago. I'm not interested in returning. The man nodded, understanding her response. We're not here to recruit you, Maria. We're here to ensure that your current life remains secure and that your previous service continues to be protected. He placed an envelope on her desk. Should you ever need assistance, or should circumstances arise that threaten your security, the contact information in that envelope will reach people who understand your value and your sacrifice. After he left, Maria sat alone with the envelope, reflecting on the path that had brought her from classified operations to elementary school administration. She had found peace and purpose in protecting children rather than conducting missions she couldn't discuss, and she had no intention of returning to her previous life. But she also understood that some skills once learned never truly disappeared. If Lincoln Elementary ever faced another threat, Maria Santos would be ready to do whatever was necessary to protect the children and community she had come to love. The quiet secretary who had seemed so ordinary had proven that heroes often hide in plain sight, waiting for the moment when their true capabilities are needed to protect those who cannot protect themselves. Have you ever met someone whose quiet competence concealed extraordinary capabilities? Maria Santos represents the kind of hidden strength that doesn't seek recognition, but rises to meet impossible challenges when innocent lives are at stake. Subscribe to those who left a trace if you believe that the most effective guardians are often those who blend seamlessly into everyday life, ready to act when duty calls. We'll see you in the next story, where we'll continue to honor those who prove that heroism comes in many forms, and that the greatest protectors are often those we least expect.